Hey everyone, we're continuing our devotional series on the Westminster Shorter Catechism, and we're looking today at question 14, what is sin? It's a question that many of us have asked, and many of us have been asked, what is sin? And usually the sin question we answer, well, sin is just breaking God's law. But what we see today is that sin is not less than that, but it's actually more than that. So let's look at question 14. What is sin? The answer is sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the law of God. So let's look at that. Let's break it down. Three different ideas here. First, this idea, this want of conformity unto. That's what sin is first defined as. And what that means is just this, we have an idea of like sins of omission, or to say it like this. Your mom asks you to clean your room and you say, okay, I'll clean my room later. And then you watch Netflix and you don't do anything. Or you're at work and your boss says, I need you to get this report done. And you say, okay, I'll get it done. And you don't do it. I'll do it later. And you go about doing what you're doing. You see how you disregard the command and you don't do it. You're omitting yourself from completing that action. That is the idea here, is God's law calls us to do things and we just don't do them. Okay? Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. We don't love our neighbor. We just kind of disregard them. We don't blatantly go out and hurt them or gossip or slander them. We just do nothing. We ignore them. That's an idea of sin. We're omitting ourselves from following God's law. They call it a sin of omission. So that's the idea of lack of conformity, or one of conformity unto God's law, is you just don't follow it. Second criteria, so sin is a one of conformity unto. It's just you don't do it. Or transgression of. And this is a little more simple. This is what we think about when we think of sin. It's like you see the no trespassing, keep out sign. You're like, nah, I'm doing it anyway. You just bulldoze right ahead. This transgression of the law of God is blatant disregarding the law and doing it anyway. And we do this all the time. I tell my kids, don't touch that. And especially Grady, he looks at me and it's like, boom, he touches it. Just blatant disregard for what I have to say, what I've told him to do, just does it anyway. My kid does it. Your kids might do it. They do it. You do it too. I do it too. God calls us to live a certain way, to follow certain commands. And sometimes we're just like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to murder that person in my heart. I'm going to speak falsely about that person. We do these things all the time. Sin, you see, it's not less than just transgressing the law of God, though. It's also that lack of conformity unto. Okay, so what is sin? A one of conformity unto, we just don't do it. Or transgressing of, we just blatantly do what we want and disregard what God has called us to do. And we do the opposite often. It's one of conformity unto, transgressing what? The law of God. That's the third kind of part we're going to look at. What is the law of God? It is God has defined what is right and true and what is wrong. God has told us what is just and unjust, what is righteous and unrighteous. He has told us that. He's given that to us in his word through Jesus, through the 10 Commandments. He has given us the law. He's given us 10 commands to follow, and we blatantly disregard them or we don't fulfill them. He's given us Jesus. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. He has given us these things, and we still fail to do that. But he has given us what is right and true. He has given us his command of how to live. And this has been a problem for us, not just since you've been born, but all the way back in the garden. When Adam received one command from God, you shall not eat of the fruit of that tree, for the day you do it, you will die. And what does Satan use all of his tempting power to do? He tries to tempt and deceive Adam that's not actually true. You will not surely die. The law of God, God's law that he says is right and true, it's not actually right and true. There's some wiggle room there. He's over-exaggerating. Y'all, I hope we see that we fight that same temptation Adam does. as well. We have Satan tempting us to say, you know what, God's law, you don't really have to do it, or you can do what you want in this situation. Y'all, sin, this one of conformity, this transgressing of the law of God, God's perfect, just, true command to us, we fight against this every single day. And so why do we go over what is sin? Because it reminds us sin is more than just blatant disregarding the keep out sign, the no trespassing sign. No, sin is deeper than that. Sin is not following through, not doing what we've been called to do, not loving the neighbor as ourselves. That's the common example I'm bringing up, but there's more of that. And it's doing that against God's perfect, holy, just, wise counsel and command to us. And so I pray that we can fight against sin. We can realize what sin is. We can see those moments in our lives where we're just not wanting to do things and say, you know what? That's my wanting of conformity unto God's law. That's my sin of omission from God's law. I need to fight against that. Or, I'm actively disobeying God right now. Lord, forgive me and help me to repent and confess and live and turn from that sin. That's why we talk about sin all the time in church. It's because we're full of it and we need to return from it. And it's why the Catechism early on talks about what sin is, because we have to fight daily against sin. And without realizing sin, you won't understand what confessing is, what repenting is, what turning from sin and towards Jesus will actually entail and require. If without sin, without realizing what sin is, we won't realize how lost we are and how beautiful the gospel is. And so that's why this morning I want us to think, what is sin? How can we fight it? And how can the Lord use this to change us for his glory? So I hope you enjoyed talking about sin. I hope it helps. And we'll look forward to seeing you all again next time. Thanks.